panel featuring CINC and VIVE to talk about all things vendor risk and how we can mitigate that risk through our integration with CINC and VIVE. So from the CINC team, we have Sarah Bloomberg. She is our Director of Sales based out of the Washington area. She's been with CINC since I've been with CINC. So I think it's a little over 3 years, which feels like 33 years, but she's been really growing CINC's brand and footprint all over the United States in her time frame here, and also has a multitude of years in community management and real estate. And from the VIVE side, we have Vice President Joe Bushy on the line. Joe has been in community management for over 20 years from VIVE and to various community management partners too. So he knows the ins and outs of this industry and of your day-to-day as well. And then leading the charge here today, we have our National Sales Director of VIVE, Connor Doyle. He has been with VIVE for, I want to say, a little over 3 years too. It's based out of the Phoenix area and has a wealth of experience in community management, running management companies as well. So with that, I am going to hand things over to Connor to go ahead and get started with our presentation today. Connor, the floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kim. It's really exciting to be here today. Just to give a little bit of background information. First of all, Kim, can you confirm that you can see my screen? Pull it off, guys. It was not an overnight thing for us to get our integration together with CINC. This is really important stuff that we're dealing with, and it was a real labor of love for both teams on the development side to get to where we are today. But I can confidently say that our integration with CINC is the best that we've done to date, and it's just really exciting to be able to talk to either current or potential CINC clients to show you how VIVE can be a small part of the ultimate value that you could get out of your company's partnership with CINC. So I'm actually going to kick it over to Joe. Since it's his company, I'm going to let him brag on us for a minute, just telling you who we are. So Joe, take it away.
Yeah, sorry about the zoomed in fat face there. No one ever likes to see their faces, Connor, and I love this slide. So as Kim had said earlier, I have background in condo and HOA management. I'm third generation family business owner. I've kind of left that world to help run VIVE and kind of work back with the peers that I used to kind of side by side go to conferences with. So it's been kind of neat. Our partnership, in addition to myself, also brings a wealth of knowledge to the table for this specific industry. Is very niche and specific languages that are spoken here. And so our team front to back, not only Connor and I coming with that depth of background, but our team now can speak the condo and HOA world. So it's just kind of a neat experience to go from there into where we've gone into now for sales, and have a team full of people that are behind us, leading the charge, helping to serve all the people after we get done selling, where Connor and I are at. And it's just been a great ride these last few years. So that's about as far as I can go there for you, Connor.
All right, that'll do. So, as we get into discussing what VIVE is, I think it's really important to first talk about why on earth are we talking about vendor compliance? Why is it important to you as people who are tasked with running management companies and taking care of the affairs of associations? So I just want to take you through a quick true story of something that actually happened to a client of ours before they signed on with VIVE. This story was actually the impetus for them to sign on with us. So this is probably going to be a familiar setup. Management company has a vendor that they worked with for a long time. At the time that they started working with that vendor, they collected a COI, W-9, did all that good stuff, maybe even tracked it for a while. But they were being honest that after a while, they just didn't stay on top of insurance renewals with this vendor, continued to use him in a variety of odd jobs. They knew him very well. He was not quite friends, but certainly someone that they had come to trust and rely on when they needed things done, particularly if it was an emergency situation. This vendor was hired to do a small repair. The repair in question was a drywall patch. There had been a sprinkler leak in one of the condo units that they managed. It was a small job, but they had to cut out a square drywall because the sprinkler head was actually inside one of the walls of the unit. So this vendor was called in after the task had been done, that the sprinkler head had been repaired, just to put a patch on the drywall. And as is often the case, this vendor then hired a subcontractor to come out and do the work. Subcontractor decided to utilize a hair dryer to dry out the drywall patch. I don't know how many of you have even a basic knowledge of how sprinkler systems work within condominiums. They are triggered by heat. The heat caused by this hair dryer caused the entire sprinkler system in the unit to go off, causing an almost complete loss of that unit and a partial loss of some of the surrounding units as well. So after the flooding has stopped, the questions start being asked of exactly how we're going to take care of the situation. And at that point in time, it is discovered that the vendor that this management company has worked with for 5+ years had let his insurance lapse at some point in time, was not currently carrying any insurance at all. And it goes without saying the subcontractor and his hair dryer were not insured either. This is when the stuff hits the fan, proverbially. So now we as management professionals have to ask ourselves not only what is the association's exposure, which we understand is extreme, but also what is our company's exposure. There is a big one, and I think one that'll probably hit close to home. You're getting fired. You're getting fired as soon as practically possible. So you've now lost out on the revenue that is being generated from this client. You're also may end up if not on the evening news for this type of loss, so it is entirely possible. This is the type of thing that is going to have ripple effects, particularly if you're in a smaller, more tight-knit community, about how something was handled, because this is, again, going to be a catastrophic loss for the association. They're absolutely going to have to file a claim on their insurance. The payout is probably going to be testing the limits of the association's insurance policy, since we're looking at multiple units that are going to require a huge amount of remediation work. So, you're now looking at it, your management company has been seen, you were responsible for bringing this vendor on, and it is now your reputation that's on the line for something that happened. You're going to have to hire a lawyer. Even if you have an indemnity clause, I'm sure you do in your contract. Indemnity clauses are things to be defended. They are not get out of jail free cards. There is a absolute certainty that you will probably have to lawyer up. You may very well be making a claim on your insurance policy as well. These things are not cheap. The way that we like to sum it up is that your starting bid for how much your company is going to have to spend to get out of this situation is $10,000. It is probable, maybe, that you will ultimately be removed from the lawsuit, that you will not actually have direct liability as a result of this. But to get from point A to B is going to cost you money to defend yourself, to defend your client. And as it so happens in the case of this condominium association, $10,000 isn't much less than what their annual contract amounts were for the actual management services in place. So basically, as a result of this, they just managed an entire condominium association for free and then lost future revenue as a result of it. And so, that's obviously hopefully not a common story, but it is certainly an idea of how things can spiral out of control as a result of us not staying on top of vendor insurance, vendor licenses, all this kind of thing. And I'm sure that there are some of you in the crowd right now, hopefully all of you, that feel that you are at least collecting COIs and W-9s as this management company did from the vendors when you start working with them. You're maybe even doing some tracking. Maybe you think that you're staying on top of tracking and that you've got staff members in-house who are making sure that they have renewed policies for all the vendors that you continue to use, which is obviously what you're looking for. But one thing that we really want to stress as we start getting into why VIVE is so important is that the simple act of collecting a COI is not enough. There are things that must be done in order to make sure that a COI is doing the job that you want it to, which is to not just say this vendor has this insurance, but that this insurance is going to cover you and the association that you're managing. Because we have to contend with the fact that uninsurance or underinsurance among small businesses, and most vendors that we work with are small businesses, is a real chronic problem in the United States. And it only gets worse in situations in which we're dealing with economic uncertainty, which certainly applies to today. So, even if your company is collecting a COI, even trying to stay on top of it, Simply accepting a COI without making sure that what's on there is suiting your needs is really only doing half the job and maybe no job at all. And the reason that this is becoming more and more vital is because the insurance costs for our clients have exploded, particularly in the last 5 years. We've almost seen a doubling in premiums, an increase in deductible amounts, more and more types of coverage that are being taken off of standard policies and being turned into supplemental coverages. That again, all of this is costing our associations a huge amount of money, particularly for condominium associations, but it applies to HOAs too. And because of how important is not important, how big the cost of insurance is relative to the total expenses for an association, having something like that, having your second or third or maybe even first largest line item on your income expense report double in cost over 5 years is obviously putting our associations in an extreme financial bind. They were not projecting this. I don't know anybody that was projecting this type of change in the insurance market for community associations. Now, VIVE can't solve that problem. Unfortunately, those are forces way outside of our control. But the one thing that is absolutely necessary, I feel, if a management company is going to really protect the financial interests of an association, is to do everything they can to make sure there are no claims made on those policies. Because if you now have something going on that loss run for the association, you're going to take a bad situation and make it worse. And it's a potentially existential situation. It is not uncommon to hear about condominium associations, particularly, no longer being insurable on either a practical or a literal level, either that the cost of coverage would be so great that it doesn't make any sense for them to have it, or that they simply cannot get coverage because of the number of losses that they've incurred over the years. So protecting that loss run, I feel, is probably one of the primary jobs of any responsible management company in today's environment. So why are we going to use VIVE? I want to sum this up, that there are 3 pillars for a management company as to why I feel VIVE is an absolutely necessary component to be doing the best job possible for your associations as well as your company. The first of those we've just been talking about is reduce risk. We are going to put into place a program in which we're not only going to set up what that program is, but then be the enforcement arm of it to try and eliminate as much as possible the possibility of any type of vendor-related liability coming back onto the association or to the management company. The second thing that we want to do, we really want to hammer home, this is about increasing internal efficiency. Even if you currently are doing all the work that we're talking about right now, collecting COIs, staying on top of renewals, maybe even having someone on your staff look over it, get the additional insured. This is a hugely time-consuming task. And it's a task that has no revenue line attached to it. We have not priced into our management contracts either the risk associated with taking on this liability or the actual work involved in staying on top of this risk management stuff, nor is it really what a management company is there to do. So we want to take that work off of your team, virtually eliminate the need to have in-house resources dedicated to this, and allow you to realize the efficiency of taking a team member or maybe more than one team member and having them do something that's client-facing, is actually driving value to your clients and is going to make your company money. And the finally is we want to bolster your bottom line, not just by increasing the efficiency in play, but also by making sure that we are, as CINC, I think, really does a great job of focusing on, is that time is money for management companies. The way that we are going to enter into the next couple of decades within our industry is for management companies to realize all of the efficiencies that are in play through technology like CINC, like VIVE, as a way of making sure that the labor hours that you're paying for are hyper-focused on client services, because clients still want human beings to talk to. Let the computers and let the people in the background do all the work that your clients aren't really focused on, but making sure that we've got an eye on the bottom line. And that bottom line is going to be driven by saving money on labor and by making sure that you don't have to write a big check if something goes wrong. So the way that VIVE reduces risk is pretty straightforward. The first thing we're going to do is establish a vendor compliance program, which is basically just an outline of all the things that we're requiring of vendors in order to step foot on one of your properties. You probably already have something like this set up, which is great. We can adopt your policy. We are not a one-size-fits-all. We are here to build a program that makes sense for your company, for your clients, for the part of the country that you're in. So we can work together. We have in-house risk management experts who can help you craft that policy if you want some advice. We've certainly been through it with quite a few companies already, so I think we have something to offer. But at the end of the day, what we want to do is come up with a program that makes sense for you. And then we're going to start the process of registering vendors. And the first step of registration for a vendor after they give us their information, so they're going to sign a master service agreement with you as a company. And what this is going to do is be a contract that is going to sit astride all the other contracts and say, above all else, you as a vendor are making an agreement, a contractually binding agreement with my management company that is going to say, first of all, you're going to follow the vendor compliance program. You are going to have your insurance cover all of our associations per contract, and that language will be reflected on the COIs. And you are going to agree to hold harmless all parties on this side of the contract. So you as a vendor are taking full responsibility for the work that you do. Any losses that are incurred while you are doing your work, they are on you. We expect you to cover them. And again, this is a legally binding document. So it's an extremely important, it's the keystone basically of the entire relationship between the vendor and the management company and its associations. Once we're through that, we're going to have the insurance agent information coming in from the vendor. We're not having the vendors upload those COIs. That's no good. We want to go directly to the insurance agent. That way, we can probably eliminate the possibility of a fraudulent COI being passed off on us. Insurance agents are usually pretty careful about that. It's also going to allow us to have a more efficient process of making sure that that COI reflects both the coverages and the language that we need in order to make sure that we are living up to our oath to make sure that you're completely covered in this situation. And then once we've established that relationship with the vendor, we are automatically going to be tracking that policy. So whenever that expiration is coming up, we're going to be reaching out to the agent. The agent's going to know about us. They're going to be automatically sending us any updates, and we're going to stay on top to make sure there are no lapses in coverage. Finally, we are going to be checking that if a vendor signs up for a trade that involves a license in the state that you work, that they are providing us evidence of that license. We are ensuring that that is current by ourselves before accepting it. We're also going to be doing some Secretary of State information searches to make sure that they are a business that's valid in the state in which you work, that they're in good standing, all that good stuff. We want to make sure that these are real businesses that we're dealing with. One of the main avenues for fraud in the community association industry are people creating fake businesses or not even creating a business at all, just pretending that they have one, and that's where embezzling comes in. So this is a way of us trying to put a check to make sure that this is a real business that is allowed to operate where you're at. And this is all going to lead towards increasing efficiency. So we're managing the risk. Now what we're doing is really allowing you to realize what we just discussed, which is your in-house resources are no longer being dedicated to this act. That we are going to be bringing vendor management tools, like my favorite one, Quick Source Bids, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. It's an integrated RFP platform that saves time for your managers when it comes to doing one of the things they like the least, which is putting out RFPs for work, but boards love them. So we know that we want to do it. That, by the way, is entirely free to both you and the vendor. We're not charging anything additionally for the use of that bid platform. And then finally, and what Joe's going to talk about here in a second is I think probably the most exciting thing for this audience is what can be realized out of our CINC integration, where basically we can serve as the source of truth for your entire vendor list, and not only save you time on the COI tracking, but also save your AP department time on data entry in terms of entering in information for vendors, staying on top of that information to make sure it's current. VIVE can take all that over for you. So what I'm actually going to do, since Joe's also our tech geek, is let him get into the nature of our integration with CINC.
All right, thank you. I haven't been called a tech geek ever, so that's great. Titles just keep coming. Kind of great job on laying the groundworks here. So the nuts and bolts of the integration, this is kind of like what I would call 2.0 integration. VIVE and pretty much almost every other compliance competitor we've ever seen has always just kind of kept a cloud version of the AP in compliance systems, and then do some form of drill down and linking and tying into just the mutual vendors and accounting. And over the years that we've been running this, we've had clients say, hey, why doesn't VIVE just reduce all that double entry and really kind of flow the data from start kind of born on data, if you will, in VIVE. And so that's what we've now built with CINC, and kudos to the CINC team. They've been great. Definitely always there when we need them and have devs available when we've needed support. But the screen here that you're looking at in the kind of quote unquote source of truth concept is a choice. Management companies don't have to rely on VIVE to be where you put vendor data. So if your people are trained in AP in sync and you're comfortable, and if that's sort of any kind of scary, you can continue to do that with VIVE. But the reason why I like it is on the left-hand side, the simple data entry, you have to put in VIVE, in sync regardless. And so we can just save those keystrokes by first putting in the information into VIVE. It takes roughly a 2-minute or less time frame for it to connect into sync. Sync to sync is a strange, tough one to kind of concept there. But that on the right hand side here, where you show the red circle, is kind of pixelated, but you can see that that's where your AP staff would actually go on the vendor side if you have permission access to add a vendor. So those are habits that if you move into VIVE with the creation, it does a couple things. One, it not only puts that new vendor into sync, it also sends an invitation out to that vendor if that vendor is in need of creating a compliant profile with VIVE. It also allows for vendors that need to go into sync that do not need to be registered or compliant with compliance profiling with VIVE. So you can put your board members, your utilities, every entity, if you will, that needs to get a payment, quote unquote vendors, can flow through VIVE in a manner that'll populate smartly. And then in the cloud, you can know at all times how performant your vendor base is in terms of their participation with registering, how compliant they are. And it helps the flow of data and just kind of the overall awareness of things. If you want to go to the next slide.
Actually, Joe, I just
Yep.
wanted to throw in here. One of the things that I think is also coolest about this is, we're sort of focusing on how we could get all of the vendors in. But if you have a vendor who is going to be going through VIVE vetting, when they register through the portal that'll be on your website, all of the information that they're going to put on there during the vendor registration process can be automatically created within Sync. We can create a new vendor record, and that's where you're really going to be able to realize some additional savings in terms of data entry. Is that a large proportion of the vendors that you would be adding to your system as you go on will be automatically populating into your system without you having to even go through this screen. So, again, all vendors can be in there. And before I move to the next slide, I know for a lot of you, one thing that's really annoying is when your managers forget about insurance renewals for your associations. It is almost every association has that sort of renewing thing. They want it to go out to bids, particularly as insurance rates are skyrocketing. So one thing that you can utilize is that even if the insurance provider for your associations is not going to be vetted by VIVE, you can utilize our contract management tool within VIVE, which is a free little thing on the side, to track those insurance policies and have your managers get a reminder 11 months into an insurance policy's term that we have an expiring insurance policy for this association that needs to be put out back to bid. And it's just one way that your managers can realize a little bit more efficiency and really help with something that I know is a constant source of frustration for your clients. Here's the second screen, Joe. I'll let you start talking.
Yeah, good point. So the data flow is not only just for the standpoint of vendor creation, but for vendor updating, which is really a function of time owning a management company. I had no idea how often and how constant it was with vendors calling in with mailing address changes and all these other things. Because the profile is vendor controlled and VIVE is vetting that information, especially over the years, things change. Contact information, sometimes DBAs are newly added to vendors' profiles, and just all of that information that needs to go back into Sync. That's what we've now got, is not only a creation tool for vendors to be inserted, but also to be updated. So it really saves time on both ends, both new and ongoing updates. This screen is highlighting all the different actual fields that we will populate and maintain. So going slowly, there's actually two. On the first bullet point, the name and DBA, those are separate different fields there. But anytime a vendor name is updated in DBA, we can feed Sync with that update. And those are as real time, as I said earlier, like the 2-minute type time frame. So it's not even a wait to the next night if you want to put that data in and update it. Or as the vendor does it, it's affecting your system as quick as we can get it pushed down in. There's an active and inactive. It's more on the top right. That's called under the status. Those are the two options that you have, but we'll go into that in just a second or two. But VIVE's tracking a myriad of different what we call compliance statuses, and then we help you guys at the client level during our implementation time to determine whether or not our answer of compliance should be consumed as active or inactive. So that we're clamping down where you're comfortable, not because VIVE has come in and kind of forced our will in there. But we have obviously some suggestions in the area, but our team works with your staff to develop the vendor management philosophy you wish in concert with VIVE. Exempt-vend management is really a new field, I think, for most of the folks in CINC. That was just added kind of with our rollout with integration. That's an indication if it's toggled over to a yes, that vendor does, if they're exempt, that would be your classic like municipalities, cities, homeowners, reimbursements, or anyone that's getting a check that doesn't represent a compliance concern. So if you're just reimbursing someone, all those kind of things, you still have to pay them, but it's just a way to indicate out of all of your vendors who's really exempt or in or out of compliance, if you will. The tax ID, which is huge for us as we're vetting that information, making sure it's valid. So if they update that, especially if you've had W-9s on file forever, we're going to be not only getting the paper copy of the W-9 updated for you, but keeping that maintained for your database. Address information. So that corporate information there that gets stamped onto the checks is all going to come through VIVE and vetted. And that's commonly what's, being updated throughout the years by vendors as they move around the world. Just so we can keep CINC up to date with that. Then last but not least is the insurance details. All of the items above the bottom bullet point have just become our kind of 2.0 arrangement. We initially just linked to the status, the exemption, and then this insurance details. So those other items are add-ons, but I come from a world of having access in accounting to have been able to put in insurance information. We have no way to know how often the CINC database is really the users are using the system. But if you dive into this saying, oh, we have all this access, you do. But just be aware back again to all of the time, effort, and liability that we talked about with Connor's earlier slides, that this, once you go into this world, it just never ends. Dates expire, and it's just a constant chasing of the wheel here. And so our system tracking all of this and our team of people going after the constant updates and just whether or not what's being submitted not only is effective on the correct dates, but compliant per your requirements. So off screen, we have a ton of data elements that we're making sure that the values and all the other binding terms of proof of coverage are meeting compliance. But as it relates to the different policy types, you can see there we have not only the carrier, so you'll know in your system which if it's like Allstate or State Farm or something like that, it'll be inserted in the policy effective dates, and I think the amounts there. So you actually see snips and pieces of what VIVE has in full on our backend that we're tracking. So that's the nuts and bolts at the vendor AP level. I'm going to go to the next screen for me. Where this also plays into, and this is where our team rolls out through implementation, is on the left-hand side. This is maybe a squirreled away piece that not every user sees in CINC, but it's for every user, you have the custom capability to in drop-down fields is on the left-hand side. And the shown screen here is the vendor status dropdown. Most of the time that when we've worked with CINC customers, there's one default answer. I think it's just called active. We help drill down a number of statuses that we track as it relates to compliance. And then on the right-hand side, that tall rectangle red boxes, then each CINC customer's answer as to how VIVE's tracking compliance, whether or not it becomes active or inactive as it relates to AP and vendor management. So you can hold accountability, as this slide shows. The world of vendors revolves around two things: getting work and getting paid for work. I mean, the vendors speak real simple terms in life. They want to do a good job and they want to get paid for it. So this is a way for you to hold accountability. If something's out of alignment with compliance, that and again, a choice, but the clients can then hold down payment until things get resolved. Doesn't mean that you're locked out and not able to pay a vendor. It just is going to slow the conversation down to try and figure out what's VIVE been up to here, and it's holding up compliance to kind of have that situation where the actual vendor and the management company would have to really kind of see eye to eye on what's going on. The other side of it too, again, paying vendors and then giving vendors work. The work order Vendor selection brings some accountability and visibility as to whether or not vendors are linked and properly up to date with insurance. So while we're doing our job tracking those things, the managers, this is another setup piece for the CINC clients during implementation, is to determine if they want to show linked vendors out to work order selection. So taking these steps holds both sides accountable, the manager side and the AP vendor management side together with all of this in the balance. So kudos to CINC. This is truly advanced compared to most accounting systems, so that we can really not only do our job, but keep it fully aware to the user base while we're doing our job. So thank you guys for building a great system. There will be some Q&A, but I think my part of the world here is back to Connor. After, there you go.
So, you know, we're always coming with this, and one of the ways in which, again, I think I mentioned this before, that we really mesh well on a philosophical level with CINC as a company, is really trying to key in on software as a tool to drive profitability for your company. We know everything's more expensive today. You need to get more out of your partners, whether they're on the software side or the vendors themselves. So I just want to wrap up and just talk about what you can expect to get out of this. And, you know, we've alluded to a lot of this, but what is the cost of a full-time position? Because if you're really doing this, and Joe just mentioned, once you start taking on the possibility of tracking renewals as something that you are going to focus on, so you can avoid the story that we talked about up front, you know, let's just say that you have 200 to 300 vendors that you're tracking over the course of a year. At minimum, that means it's at 300 policies. Some policies expire after 6 months. That could add to that number. Some people have multiple lines. Their workers' comp is separate from their general liability, which means that you're tracking 2 separate policies. All of this means that you are creating a massive, massive administrative burden for you and your company. And that is something that could be alleviated almost completely by us. So the possibility, again, of reducing the need for a position, not necessarily maybe to lay somebody off, but really to have you like someone enough to hire them, they should be doing something that is client facing. We think that's really important. We've talked about the reduced data entry for accounting. Accounting people are very good. Accounting people are hard to come by. Let's not burn them out making unnecessary keystrokes. You know, again, reducing, if not eliminating, the possibility of incurring legal costs as a result of something that a vendor does. You will have this tied up. You will have a shield that if something goes wrong, when something goes wrong, you're not going to have to face a consequence for it. And finally, there is a possibility for revenue share, but this is something that's going to be very customized to every individual company that we work with. But, you know, it is something that's there. We'd love to talk to you about it if you're interested. So I'll just sort of leave that out there without getting into it too much. I just wanted to run over a couple of quick benefits before wrapping up. I know that we've gone on for about 30 minutes here, which is everybody's upper limit for a PowerPoint presentation. So thank you for your patience so far. There are some other things that we do here on the vendor management side. Obviously, the core of what we're trying to provide to your managers is going to be an on-demand approved vendor list. It's going to be searchable on a map, so they're going to be able to see. Vendors are going to tell us what their service area is. They will be able to then look at where their association is and whether or not those service providers are actually eligible to work on their property. We're also going to have a vendor rating system. You can kind of see what it looks like on the side. We basically set up a Yelp style review, so you can start having some institutional memory about experiences with vendors. It's really, really exciting to me as someone who once ran a management company. I was always upset that we did not have a black book. You know, if someone does you wrong, you should remember it and make sure that it's less likely that they'll be able to do another one of your clients wrong. Conversely, we need to funnel more work to the people who are actually doing good work, not just because they're popular with one manager. So this is a great way as an organization to start assessing vendor quality outside of the more subjective individual relationships that might be present. I mentioned that contract management tool. Again, it's just something there if you want to use it. It's got a couple of really exciting applications. And finally, that integrated RFP platform. I just want to show you, this is what our big comparison report looks like. The idea is that we take something that's arduous, allow your manager to create an RFP in a short amount of time. They can include an unlimited number of vendors. We know that vendor response rates for RFP aren't great. So include 12 vendors on a bid. It does not cost your manager any more time to include additional vendors. And what it's also doing is showing your vendors that they're getting more opportunities to work as a result of them having getting VIVE verified. We're going to then produce this automated bid comparison report. Your manager has to do no work to put this together. You can email it to a board, slide it into a board package. It's going to be your company logo on the right-hand side there where it says clientela. And we are not monetizing this. I know that there are other bid services out there where they are trying to get your vendors to pay a subscription fee or pay per bid or whatever that is. No, we look at this instead as a way of really sort of getting to the value of them being an approved vendor, which means that they have exposure to these bid opportunities from your company. We don't charge you, we don't charge the vendor. It's free for everybody to use. So hopefully everybody will be able to get this. If you need to get a hold of me, the easiest way is just go to getvived.com. Get Vive was already gone by the time we got there. Also, you can reach me. That's my cell number. More than happy to speak to anybody about our service or get into more depth about anything that we talked about today, because this is supposed to be sort of a 30,000-foot view. And what I'd like to do now is open up the floor to Q&A.
So Connor, one question that I wanted to ask you is when you are, and thank you so much for the wealth of this information, when you are reaching out to other management companies and talking to them about vendor risk, what are some of the common reasons why someone might say no to you and give you like some kind of objection? What are some of the common objections that you hear?
Man, Kim hit me with the hard one right up front.
Thank you.
Right? I think everybody has the same concern that bubbles up into their mind is, are my vendors going to pay for this? And it's a totally legitimate concern. And I don't want to BS anybody. Vendors do not love paying for things. No one likes paying for anything. And moving to this model has involved a little bit of conditioning for our industry. It is not something that really we saw a whole lot of until this last decade. And if we're being honest, and part of the reason is Vive's presence in the market, it's really amped up in the last 5 years where you're seeing more and more companies utilizing a third-party compliance model that charges vendors for the aspect of it. The easy answer that I could point to is that 35,000 vendors have registered nationwide with Vive over the course of these last 5 years. We work with more than 100 management companies, including some of the biggest companies in the country. And there is proof in the pudding that we actually have results to show that this is something that vendors will do. But there's a lot of gray area in there, and for certain markets, it may be a different story. There is no question that urban markets vendors have probably already been exposed to third-party compliance in other industries. We were sort of the last industry to really embrace this within the commercial world, within multi apartments. This has been something that has already been a function that they've been following. It's, as is usually the case in association management, we tend to kick it old school a little bit longer than most people, and that we're really now bringing our industry into a place that other industries were already at. But the other aspect of this is just value. And it's something that we really try and focus on in our messaging to vendors. We do not want this to be viewed as a cover charge. We do not want to emphasize that this is, you must do this, because we do know that is going to get some pushback. What we want to instead focus on is opportunity. Vendors spend a huge amount of money on an annual basis marketing themselves to your managers and your company. As you well know, if you allowed it, you'd have a lunch and learn in your office every single day. All of your managers would be out to lunch with a host of vendors, and it would be general chaos. No work would get done, but vendors would have a great time marketing, new irrigation timers or whatever it is they want to flex on. That's what your entire day would be composed of. So what we instead want to do is really harness the marketing efforts into something that is directed towards positive outcomes for the company itself. And this all goes back to, who is this relationship with? The relationship is not with an individual manager. And in most cases, the relationship is not with an individual board, though if it is, there are ways of working around that too. But ultimately, the management company is the opportunity for the vendor that even if they only work for one property, you manage dozens, you manage hundreds of properties in their service area. That is an opportunity for them. And when taken along that, our base rate of $99 per year is a really, really small figure when we take into account the actual amount of money that a vendor stands to make by having an expanded relationship with with your management company. So that's the messaging that we want to put out there to vendors, that this is a qualification. This is a sifting. Part of my life is that I present at like trade shows, like CAI trade shows. And I have booths right next to vendors that we are vetting. And it's sort of I thought it was going to be a more awkward situation than it is. But the truth is, most of the vendors that I interact with actually view us ultimately as a benefit. Because if you talk to vendors, particularly like really professional, reputable ones, their biggest pet peeve are the number of bad actors that are floating around within our industry who are not licensed, are not insured, are undercutting them on bids, because it's really easy to do cheap work if you're not spending any money on your business. And so we will serve as a way of clearing out some of those problems, both for your company, but also for the other vendors that are working, and give them an opportunity to make sure that they are now competing with other professional companies that are doing what needs to be done to protect the other parties involved. So, we've gone through this a lot. Joe, let me just get to you in 1 second. We've gone through this a lot, 35,000 times, but we're also constantly refining the way that we approach vendors. And it's in tandem with you. Everything that's going to go out, all messaging to your vendors, is going to be under your brand, and you are going to have full editing authority on what is going to be messaged to them, because we ultimately want to be cognizant of the fact that you're in a relationship with your vendors. In a lot of cases, you've relied on vendors to help grow your business. And what we want to do is hopefully show them that this isn't just a charge, that there's value, that they'll get more work out of it, and that they'll be in a more exclusive club now. And Joe, I'll let you jump in there.
Yeah, no, I mean, let's face it, Kim, you hit, the toughest and best thing up front. Why wouldn't a management company want to do this? This is free to you. The associations don't have to pay, and we, elevate whatever is being done now to the highest level with a professional team that's trained and focused just in this narrow walk of life. And so cost to the vendor is typically 95% of what we deal with in terms of a no or concern of moving forward with a management company. But the other stuff is just really relative to frequency and trusted relationships. So, vendors by and large do a decent job on a daily basis to not expose problems all the time. So it takes a while sometimes, time on water managing a company. It took like 10 years for us to see our first loss with the vendor that really kind of came back and bit my management company, or had the chance to really undo a lot. And so it doesn't happen that often. So it's just kind of like, why do you take, that heart medication? Well, it's to save off that really long term. That's the thing that we're doing here, is to kind of help when that situation, when you never know what's going to happen or how often, that it's just best practices. And then the other thing is, just because management companies are creatures of habit, you get good relationships with vendors. If you've been in business for long enough period, you have to have trusted vendors. Are an essential piece to managing property. Ultimately, relationships get a little bit too homey. Managers and vendors get a little bit too close. Vendors are handed off with relationships with boards that can be a little bit too involved. And so our slogan, or our catchphrase under our name doesn't get a lot of push a lot, but it's trust but verify. We've got to still make sure, even if you're trusted, that we still verify. Believe it or not, after I would have been the classic no management company if I would have come to me as a management company owner, because I lived under the fallacy that my staff, although had been fully trained, and had available access to great tools to enter some data, when I really dove in and actually looked at the certs that were coming in our office compared to what I had trained and thought we were really approving, it was really, really eye-opening. I mean, that's why the light bulb went on to say, hey, there's a need for this in this industry, is because I actually stopped for a moment, got myself out of the way, and actually got into the process to realize, geez, they don't have the time to do it, and B, they don't have the wherewithal. And we were letting so many exceptions go that we had no idea to even put a measurable list on it. Vendors that had started small were let off the hooks on certain things, and now they're making $300,000 a year, and they don't even have like competent levels of general liability coverage, just because nobody watched it. It just had no way to watch and manage it. And so that's what VIVE helps bring, just the leveling of the playing field. Look, Mr. Vendor Base, if you want to come here, it's a fair bar for everybody to jump over. It's just, here's the bar, and it comes with a small annualized cost. So it's really as simple as that. So those are the objections that we typically get: cost, trusted vendor relationships that just haven't bit them much or often, and just the willingness to make some of those changes. So
nice. All right, and we're about 1 minute over time. So Sarah, I'm going to ask you one super duper quick question, just very 30-second answer for an overarching view. Can you share a little bit of insight as to what CINC does to build partnerships with our vendors and what our relationship is like with VIVE.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, hello, everyone. I'll keep this very brief. I think, we're very fortunate to be partnered with VIVE. The CINC ideology is very much aligned with VIVE's ideology. We're fortunate to be able to talk to many management companies and a lot of executives of management companies consistently. And there seem to be these overarching themes. I'd say I can narrow it down to really 3 themes of what leaders are really looking for. I mean, building happy and healthy communities, making it a positive experience for homeowners and boards to be part of professionally managed communities. Number 2 would be making sure, and this is in no particular order, but making sure that you're creating a great culture within your own company and your own teams, and allowing your team and empowering them to do a lot more with the finite hours that we all have, right? And then also EBITDA. How do you improve EBITDA margins? And VIVE is doing they're taking action on all 3 of those different columns, if you will. And so as we see the industry continue to evolve and we see solutions and tech stacks mature, this is a way to somewhat differentiate yourselves and do a lot more. But I think as time goes on, we will start to see a lot more of these things become commonplace and standards. I'm really glad, Connor, that you touched on profitability, that you touched on, the rev share piece of this, because I think those are impactful to the bottom line day one. But overall, there's so many efficiencies all across the board. I'll defer to Connor and Joe for any actual technical questions, because they're the subject matter experts. But just wanted to share that, we are very fortunate to be able to partner with VIVE in this way.
Awesome. All right. Well, that concludes our vendor management conversation with VIVE today. Thank you for bearing with us as we go over a little bit, but I really appreciate everyone being on here today. We will be sending you the recording shortly, and of course, you'll have Connor's information if you would like more to get in touch with him. With that being said, thank you so much for joining, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon on this Tuesday.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.